G'day, everyone. Finally, for the first time in ages, I'm live and in conversation with you. And it's a high energy day because it's my book launch day. As you probably know, this is the day that Echoes of Eden becomes available on Amazon, Kindle, and across all book selling platforms. It's been a huge build up, it's been an amazing amount of work. And now, in a matter of hours, it will go live on all those platforms. And in a few hours' time, I'll put out a book launch video just to let everyone know. There'll be a video on the Paul Wallace channel, and there'll be a video on the Fifth Kind TV as well, just to let the world know Echoes of Eden, the third in the Eden series, is now available. And I thought, well, this is a special enough occasion for me to be sitting down with my premium members and saying, hello, thank you so much for sharing the journey with me. Thank you for your support, your patience in waiting for the next live stream. I really appreciate. That's been a unique way of supporting me in the recent weeks and months with all the work that's been going into Echoes of Eden and the other content that's been going out for free to view viewing. But I love having my conversations with you guys, and we're starting off very exclusive. The notification did go out, but I find each time that some people get their YouTube notifications and other people don't, and they have to watch it on the replay. So Yvonne and Arnold, I know you'll be watching the replay. You're caught up in an event right now, but I'll see you then, and we'll be in conversation. Thank you, Anna. You were the first on the line from Portugal. As you know, I love Portugal. I have very happy memories of my time in that country, and hopefully I'll visit Portugal again sometime soon. And Chad, you're such a stalwart supporter, and your presence always gives me energy and encouragement. So thanks for being the second here today. And there are others coming online right now. In a few moments, I'll peer over my specs and see who's in the conversation. If you have a comment, message, question, pop it in the live chat, and hopefully I'll get to it. I am just going to begin by saying what's coming up, what's in the news for Paul Wallace channel and what I'm up to. And then I want to talk a little bit about the journey that led to Echoes of Eden. Why is there a third in the Eden series? What could possibly be there that I haven't covered in Escaping from Eden and the Scars of Eden? How did it come about? And where am I going next with it? So what's coming up in the next week, in book launch week, I'm going to be on Coast to Coast, which I'm absolutely thrilled about. That will be the wee small hours of May the 4th, the Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. So I'm really looking forward to that. George Nor has been a wonderful supporter of my writing in the Eden series. I contacted him to ask if he'd be happy to endorse Echoes of Eden. And within the hour, he had read a chunk of the book and replied with his endorsement, which, if you haven't seen it, is absolutely wonderful. He says, Paul has done it again with his Eden series, delving deep into the power of the mind to do incredible things. And it's a lovely quote because that really is where Echoes of Eden goes. It looks at questions of human potential, higher cognitive abilities, but the reason we go there is in the tagline of the book. And the tagline of the book asks this question: what secrets of human potential were buried with our ancestors' memories of ET contact? Because as I've shown in Escaping from Eden and the Scars of Eden, indigenous narratives about human origins have been suppressed so many times over through history, and especially in moments of colonization where a religious orthodoxy has gone in with the conquering force and wished to delete and replace all the local narratives that have another story about who we are, what we're capable of, and where those capabilities came from, and then how we switch them on. And that's the territory that we explore in Echoes of Eden. As well as Coast to Coast coming up, I've got Open Minds, 2 episodes of that, recording with Regina Meredith, who's my favorite interviewer. And then I've got 2 documentaries done, uploaded in the pipeline for the Paul Wallace channel. The first will be a video that looks at where we're up to after the Senate briefings of 2021, takes a look at the story of President Eisenhower and his emergency dental appointment in 1954 that may or may not have been a meeting with representatives of ET factions and the signing of a treaty. What's the credibility of that story? Where does it come from? How does it relate to other information that's out there? And I wonder what you think about that story too. So that's in the pipeline for the Paul Wallace channel. We have other documentaries, more highly produced, thanks to my collaborator Tony Barrett for the Fifth Kind TV. All that's coming up. Audibles. I get so many requests for the Audible versions of the Eden books, and it is absolutely on my agenda to get the Audibles out because I know that is how many people read their books. It's how people redeem the time while they're commuting. And a lot of people like to go to sleep to an Audible book. I know some people go to sleep listening to my videos, which I always take as a compliment, I should say. And I do want to do the audibles in my voice because that's what people are requesting. It's been really slowed for purely mundane technological reasons. I've made a couple of starts on Escaping from Eden, but I find that I just can't achieve where we live the level of soundproofing that's needed for an audible book. And for half the time I've been trying to get it done, we've been locked down, so I haven't had access to nearby studios. I think I have now located a studio that's near enough for me to be able to use it. And it has to be near enough because for a week to 10 days, I really need to be able to get there at the same time every day, preferably early in the morning between 8:30 and 10:30. Because if you don't do it at the same time every day, then you'll have half a dozen different sounding voices in the book, which is actually not a very pleasant listening experience. It has to be the same voice that reads the whole book. And so you have to record kind of in the same 2 hour window every day for a number of days. And you need to be able to hire a studio on that basis that you can get to at those times while you're doing other work and looking after the kids, so on and so forth. So these have been some of the limiting factors, but we are now allowed out of our house and out of our town, and I do have a studio that I believe I can get to do it. So a little later this year, I'll start on Escaping from Eden, and then move on to the Scars of Eden, and then on to Echoes of Eden. So it's in the pipeline. It's definitely happening. Thank you for all those who are waiting patiently for it, and it's going to happen. I'll enjoy doing it as well because I do enjoy reading my books. Before getting into other news, I want to give a shout out to Barbara and Glenn, who I know love watching my content, and absolutely thrills me to know particular people around the world who, every time I put something out, I know they'll be watching it and enjoying it. And just knowing that gives me a certain energy when I'm recording and editing and producing my content. Thank you for being such stalwart fans. And I want to give a shout out to Chris as well. These three are somewhat related. So Barbara is Chris's mum. And my best wishes to you, and very happy to be keeping you company. Chris, I won't say too much, but he's an absolute hero. He always encourages me and enthuses me. And he is a person who has a pate almost as magnificent as my own. And I want to thank Chris because he's actually trying out some products that my wife is making. Now, my wife has a business called Afroshi, which is natural treatments for hair and skin. It's what I use on my beard and on my scalp. And we're trying out some shaving oils and aftershave oils. And so Chris has been bravely pioneering these in the UK to see how they work in the UK climate. And so, Chris, I've got some more to send you for you to try out. Let us know how you get on. Send me some pics. And thank you so much for your partnership in this because I love what my wife does. And being a man who does shave his head on a daily basis, I know the importance of getting a product that will actually allow you to do it without injuring yourself. So thanks, Chris. for doing that for us. Thank you for your encouragement. Barbara and Glenn, I hope you're having a wonderful day and thanks for being part of the conversation. Yvonne and Arnold, thank you for the recipes. Something that was in the news for the Wallace family over the last 12 months is we made a move from the city to a country town nearby so that our kids would have more space to play in, which has been really important during the lockdown periods, and give us enough room to grow our own food. And we've been really fortunate here. There was a developed vegetable bed and neighbors who could point out to us what was growing in our garden that was edible, because it's been such a long time since Ruth or I have actually grown our own food that we had lost the ability to recognize what was food and what was a weed. Now, our next door neighbors have been showing us, and Yvonne and Arnold have been sending me recipes to know how to pickle the surplus and things like that. Now, this might sound totally irrelevant to the Eden books, but it really does tie in, because our position here of being able to grow our own food, but needing to be reminded of how to do it by people who've always done it, really relates to one of the themes of Echoes of Eden. Because Echoes of Eden asks the question, where do we go for the suppressed information, the other narratives that explain who we are, what we're capable of, how we can live intelligently and more consciously on the planet? And it says that we go to indigenous traditions, to the folklore, and that this folklore is sometimes hard to find. And sometimes you have to really decide in advance that you're going to counter some of your cultural programming, which is all about disrespecting the wisdom of your elders and your grandparents and your great grandparents and the traditional keepers of the land. And Echoes of Eden says, this is where we have to go. This is where we need to listen with an open ear for the information we need. And our learning to grow food again has been a tiny little case in point of that, because we want to grow our own food. We want to eat clean, healthy, organic food. And one of the reasons for that is what I've found in ancestral narratives, which says that when your body is maximally healthy, that's your best place for beginning to engage your higher abilities. If you're super stressed, if your body is stressed with toxins, if your mind is stressed with anxiety, that's not a good place to be if you want to begin expanding and accessing your higher capabilities. You have to look after those things, your emotional state, your physical state. You have to look after your environment, and what you're ingesting is a big part of that. So at this point, I'm going to pause and see what messages and comments I've got coming in. So excuse me leaning in here. Is today your birthday? Yeah, well, it's my birthday week. It was my birthday on the 29th. And in my family, we have a tradition of celebrating the birthday for a week. And the reason we did that with our kids is that for one reason or another, we found it sometimes difficult to get everything happening as it needed to happen on the day. You know, kids want a cake, they want a party, their presents have to be all ready, there are other moving parts. And we found that if we said we're celebrating your birthday all week, it gave us more opportunity to really tick every box and hit every bullseye. So that's our family tradition. So it's my birthday week, and I kind of deliberately put the book launch in the middle of the week as well. So it's a very high energy week. Thanks, Joe, for your congratulations. Hi, Dirty Higgins. I love seeing you in the comments, and I recognize all your names when I see you. It always gives me a lift. Hi, Shelley. It's lovely to see you here again. You'll be the first Audible buyer. Good on you, Shelley. Tell me how you go with it, and I hope it ticks the box for you when it comes. Chad says there really is something about being able to connect with Earth, others, etc. When you can grow your own food, enjoy it, and share that knowledge. We need more people like this. Yes, that's right. Sharing the food is superb. Where we live in our country town, a lot of people will grow particular foods. They'll always have a surplus, and sometimes they'll have a little basket or bucket on their front lawn. and they're either giving it away to anyone who needs that food, or they'll just sell it for a modest amount, and there'll be a little bucket there for people to leave their cash, which I absolutely love. And I've talked in other places about how my maternal grandparents survived the very challenging years of the Depression in the 1930s. And it was because their little run of houses, um, and I always get the number wrong, they were semi detached houses, and there were five of them clumped together. So there's a particular group of 10 with strip gardens. They all grew food. Some had chickens, some had goats, and they simply pooled their resources and shared with each other, and it was on a really informal basis. It wasn't a barter basis. It was just my gran would say to my mum's friend, "Oh, take some eggs home for your mum, see if she can do something with them." Really informal and easy, but it just meant that people had enough food to get through those years without needing money to exchange for food. And well, it's just worth having that as an option should that ever become necessary. It's a great way of connecting with other people. Absolutely. We've connected with our neighbors through it, through learning how to grow our food again. And I think rediscovering each other at a local level is is always good, whether it's vital to get you through hard years or just for the sake of being good neighbors and not frightened of each other. I think it's a wonderful thing. So yeah, Chad, I'm absolutely with you there. Oh, that's beautiful, Shelley. Shelley says, brings me great joy to help those less fortunate than I, especially the homeless living on streets. Bag them up for 3 days, healthy, fresh food. Yeah, what a wonderful thing to do. Um, if you produce a surplus, then why wouldn't you do that? And it is such a joy. Absolutely. All right, I'll keep my eyes peeled for more comments. Why did they have to be an Echoes of Eden? By the time you've read Escaping from Eden and the Scars of Eden, you might think, well, where can Paul go from there? He's kind of written about everything now, hasn't he? And I did find when I was writing Escaping from Eden, I was having to answer the question, how do I stop this being a book about everything? Because these topics are so, they flow on from one another so much. And I just had to keep coming back to what's the purpose of the book? What's the tagline? What question am I answering? And at the end of Escaping from Eden, I'd taken the reader back to a point where the believer, for instance, is having to think, well, what are the implications of this for my faith, for my ideas about Jesus? And I sort of left that hanging a little bit at the end of Escaping. And then we'd also reached a point of knowing that once you realize our stories of origins is different to what we thought, that means the story of us and our potential is different. And I sort of left that hanging. And then in Scars of Eden, I go a little bit deeper into helping people to bed this information down and then see the evidence in our psychology as a species, in our geopolitics as a human race, for the aftermath of paleo contact. And we explore that in the Scars of Eden. By the end of Scars of Eden, you know that the deepest answers to these questions are in the world's indigenous narratives, in the initiation cultures that exist around the world. And I sort of left that hanging a little bit. So these were all loose ends that demanded we go back and listen again and go a little bit deeper. And that's what we do in Echoes of Eden. Again, it's a world tour. We go all around the world. We go to Zambia, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Greece. We go to Wales, England, Scotland. We go to Brazil. We go to, we take a couple of trips to Athens. We come to Australia. We go to Arizona and to other parts of the USA. We go to Canada, to British Columbia. And I love doing that, going around the whole world and saying there is a narrative that exists all around our planet, curated by cultures all around the globe that keep repeating the same notes. And there's a coherent picture in what the indigenous stories of our planet have to tell us. And I like it if the book almost feels like a travel book. where you're traveling around the world, you're meeting people, and you're hearing the stories and recognizing these same notes coming up. And these are all real travels. And you might read Echoes thinking, how did Paul fit this into 12 months, all this travel? And I'll tell you guys a little secret that the travels in Echoes take us back to the 1980s. These are travels that I've made over the last 40 years. When you read it in adjacent pages and adjacent chapters, it gives the impression I might have done this tour of the world in 12 months. But it's really actually joining the dots of things I've learned traveling around the world over a 40-year period. And there are things I experienced, for instance, in Brazil, which impacted me at the time in my 20s, but it took me 20 years to process some of what I'd seen and experienced. It probably took me 30 years to fully think through the implications of things that were explained to me at the time, and seeing the connection between the religious reforms that Pope John Paul II was visiting upon Catholicism in Brazil while I was visiting and watching, seeing the connections between that and what King Josiah was doing in Jerusalem in the 7th century BCE, and realizing that this is a seamless story of suppression, and that the narrative that's being suppressed is a story of paleo contact. Well, once you join those dots, you have to tell that story, because that is just mind blowing and incredible. And going back to Brazil and sharing that experience is a way of showing in real time what this suppression looks like. It's not just looking back on history and a two-page summary of something that took 100 years to happen and try to imagine what that looked like or felt like. By including the Brazil narrative in Echoes of Eden, I tell you what it looks like in real time and what it feels like to the locals, and how the information manifests itself, and how it gets hidden, how it gets suppressed, how you can recognize it when it's not told to you directly. So it's a section of the book I'm really, really proud of. It comes towards the end. You'll have to read the whole of Echoes of Eden to get to that section. And I tell you that just to whet your appetite. Scars is about memories of ET contact. Has humanity confused the idea of God with memories of ET contact? And one of the sort of personal themes that runs through the Scars of Eden is that in the process of writing, I'm actually remembering my own memories of ET contact. And I talk about anomalous experiences that may have been close encounter experiences now that I look back on them. And in Echoes of Eden, something similar happens. It's about secrets of human potential. And in the process of writing Echoes, I've joined the dots and looked back and realized I have had all these personal experiences of higher cognitive abilities switching on unintentionally. I'm not writing as an expert practitioner of telepathy or future viewing or remote viewing, but like probably all of you sharing this live stream with me right now, you can think of moments where you've had a flash, an intuitive flash, a flash of remote viewing, a flash of future viewing, flash of telepathic connection. And when these things happen, they always wow us and catch us by surprise and catch our attention. And we think, wow, I wonder if I could do more of that. I wonder if I can nurture that and develop it. Well, the guardians and elders of indigenous cultures around the world do exactly that. They do nurture it, and they have protocols for nurturing it. And so I explore the ancient territory from a personal viewpoint, knowing that these things are real because I've experienced them myself, and wanting to know what information is there that can allow us to access these abilities more consistently. Now, I don't do this in it's not an expose of the secrets that indigenous peoples have curated, because initiation culture is essentially private. Indigenous peoples hold secrets that belong to that people group and that empower successive generations of that people group. And those things are held sacred and they're held secret. And some of the secrecy is there because of the suppression and brutalization those people have experienced. So in Echoes of Eden, I'm not marching in to initiation ceremonies, recording what's happened, and then I'll tell you the recipes, the protocols to replicate what they're doing. But I've been very fortunate that certain elders and certain guardians have sat down with me and they've told me enough that I can understand what they're doing, why they're doing, and share that with you so that in your turn you can sit at the feet of traditional healers, shamanic leaders, elders, and guardians, maybe from your own cultural heritage or the cultural heritage of the people among whom you live, and make something of this journey for yourself. So that's what it is. Again, it's being a gateway into that territory, and that's really the function of all the Eden books, to be a gateway into these topics, to bring a wider audience into the realization that there's something important and very special here to be discovered and explored, not just for information's sake. Oh, now I understand human origins differently, but for the sake of knowing better who we are and therefore how we can live more consciously, more intelligently, and how we can each have a better human experience empowered by this ancient knowledge and ancient wisdom. So I'll have another peer at what's coming in the comments. Joe Hodgson, I've had a strong push to go vegetarian and not drink alcohol this year. Good on you, Joe. My diet's changed as well. And I find when I compare notes with other researchers into human potential, high cognitive abilities, almost everyone's diet has shifted in the process, not out of any kind of credo or dogma or because they've been told, just through tuning into their bodies and knowing what their bodies want and don't want, how much or how little meat their body is really craving, how much clean water their body is actually craving, the things that they realize they don't have an appetite for because there are toxins in it, which you only find out after you stop drinking or eating it, and then you ask, well, why is my body not wanting that? There is an amazing subtle connection between what we eat, our physical health, and our awakeness and our alertness and our ability to engage with higher wisdom. And it's not something I understand, it's something I'm discovering. And so I'm sharing the journey as that happens. Joe, I'm sure you are as well. So thank you for that. Are you familiar with books like The Law of One or Urantia? Asks Joe. No is the short answer, but they're all on my list. And I'm on such a roll at the moment of unpacking what I have learned and what I have read. And to a certain extent, there are books that are on the back burner because I have to follow my own research path and follow my own logic. And then at some point, I'll sit down and compare notes with some of the other literature that's out there. I had to make that decision with Zecharia Sitchin, for instance. I had never heard of Zecharia Sitchin before I wrote Escaping from Eden. And I was just at the finishing off process of Escaping from Eden when I discovered Zecharia Sitchin and thought, oh, okay, I'm not the first person to come to these conclusions off the basis of reading the Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian, and Assyrian stories. What do I do now? Do I stop, read everything Sitchin wrote, and then go back to writing? And I had to decide, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to follow my own data, follow my own logic, reach my conclusions so that there's an integrity to what I'm doing, so that I'm not writing a he said, she said book. I'm saying, here's some data, let's apply logic to that, see where it takes us. And then, if any of my conclusions match Zecharia Sitchin's conclusions or anybody else's, then that's more interesting for the reader. It's far more interesting if each following their own data reaches overlapping conclusions. Then that's a flashing light to say there's something here. And I think it is interesting. My conclusions don't overlap 100% with Zechariah Sitchin's, but there is an overlap and a significant one. And then I discovered Mauro Bellino, and so he enters my story in the Scars of Eden. Again, I didn't reach my conclusions because I'd read Mauro. I reached my conclusions through my own work of Bible translation and hermeneutics and source analysis over and against and with ancestral narratives around the world. And I came to similar conclusions to Mauro, who is very, very well qualified to speak to the Hebrew translation questions. So that then becomes interesting. And we've got collaborations in the pipeline for later this year, something else that's coming up. So with the Law of One, Urantia, similar there. I have my particular sources that I'm working on and deriving information from. And at some point, I'll sit down and read those books and say, oh, okay, there's really interesting overlap here. And then there's some thoughts that are new to me here as well. So I will get to those. They're on my list, but no, I haven't read them yet, Joe. Who else do we have here? April, welcome. Good to have you here. I'll go back to the stories that led me into Echoes of Eden. When I talk about higher cognitive powers, it's easy to find ancient traditions that speak about these things. First off, they speak about a time when our ancestors had higher cognitive powers than we do. So in the Popol Vuh, it talks about a time when our vision wasn't limited in the way it is today. So today our vision is limited by surfaces. We can't see into things, we can't see behind things. It's limited by space. We can't see beyond the horizon, we can't see into outer space. Limited by time. We can't see the past, we can't see the future, we can only see the present. It's limited by frequency. We can only see light between here and here, whereas a cat might see that, a dog might see that. And so the hint in the Mayan story of origins, the Popol Vuh, there was a time when our vision wasn't limited by those things. So immediately you're looking into things. You've got X-ray vision. You're looking into the future. You've got precognition. You're looking into deep space. You've got remote viewing. And so it's that kind of higher cognitive power that our ancestors spoke about. And then they have their shamanic and mystical protocols for triggering it and accessing it. And that's why in the 1500s and in Echoes of Eden, we go to the 1500s, all of a sudden the Secret Service of Queen Elizabeth I and the Secret Service of other countries were wanting to access information that had been sequestered from Central and South American sources because they wanted to get departments of remote viewing working for their intelligence services. So you can go to the past and learn about it there. But I was given a real impulse to really look at that and delve a little further by knowing about it in the recent past. So I look at the CIA's supervised programs of remote viewing, and then I realize I've had experiences myself, and I share some of those in Echoes. I mentioned them in some of my videos and audio onlys. And then I saw a boy of 6 do it, who in the book is called Carl. And I'll just leave it to your imagination who that might be. And watching a 6-year-old do remote viewing was awe-inspiring, because it's one thing to believe it's possible. It's one thing to remember times when you've done it. But again, to watch it in real time brings a whole other dimension to it. And so that gave me the impulse to explore that topic. What is the credibility of it? On what footing can we understand it? I've been very fortunate to have a number of white rabbits to follow in my explorations. And one of those white rabbits is the father-son team of Stephen and Evan Strong. and they were willing to share with me experiences of initiation in Aboriginal Australian tradition that is about engaging with phenomena like remote viewing, precognition, translocation. And that brings us on to the exploration of portals and wormholes. And to know that portals and wormholes are used by Indigenous people and are spoken about in traditional Indigenous narratives and are physically researched by NASA for more than 30 years, who have empirical data about where particular portals can be found and how much physical material travels through them on an 8-minute cycle. It's all very empirical and it's been examined scientifically. I knew I had to explore that because of contact I'd had with veterans of war who'd returned in particular from Iraq, whose units had been deployed in the 2003 incursion into Iraq. And I had a number coming to me saying, Paul, what do you know about portals? Because they'd come back wondering why they were there. They'd gone in on the same understanding as the rest of us that there needed to be a regime change in order to save the Kurds from genocide and in order to save the world from weapons of mass destruction, so on and so forth. But then they got there and they found that their unit was on an archaeological mission. And so they came back thinking, why did I risk my life and the life of my men for archaeological artifacts? What were we boxing up and sending to Israel or the USA? Why was my friend's unit boxing up quantities of sand and shipping that out of the country? And then why have I heard from my peers in the forces that sequestering ancient technology was part of the story and that the prime goal was to locate an ancient portal of some kind, some ancient portal technology, which some referred to as a Stargate. So I was having questions like that that forced me to engage with it. And then I've heard from others who are more directly involved in the Stargate aspect of our incursion into Iraq. Now, if all that's news to you, you'll want to read Echoes of Eden and put that in context and understand why we have to go there and explore that. When people came back and asked me, what's the credibility of the idea there could be a portal not above the Earth, but on the Earth's surface? I can't answer that as someone who's had eyes on, although I know people who have. I have to answer that from the basis of my own research. And so I've been able to reply by saying, well, there's scientific credibility to portals and wormholes. NASA has spent millions of dollars on this through the Advanced Propulsions Unit, and they've made all the studies I just mentioned over 30 years. So scientifically, yes, it's got credibility. If you're looking for eyewitnesses, yes, it's got credibility. If you're listening to ancestral narratives, yes, it has credibility. If you're looking for where on the planet you'd expect to find it, listen to the Sumerian stories and Genesis 11, and you will want to go into Iraq. So join the dots. And Echoes of Eden is all about joining the dots, seeing the continuity of information from century to century, millennium to millennium, culture to culture. What is the coherent picture that emerges when you put these traditions together? I've been so blessed by people who've had the courage to share their experiences with me, which includes a number of veterans of war. And you'll read about Sean, who appears as a contactee, as an experiencer of abduction for hybridization. In the Scars of Eden, you had the story of Akuya from Anloga in the Kita district of the Volta region of Ghana, a real person with connections with my family. And through that individual story, we explore the whole world of stories of abduction and hybridization and realize this is a global story and an ancient story, something slightly different to what you might have read in the National Enquirer, and that has some profound implications. In Echoes of Eden, we go to Sean because Sean has another layer of information that relates to that. And I won't use their real names here. I I change a lot of names in the telling of stories because not because people share and say, don't identify me. Many people say, I'm happy for you to use my name. But in a lot of cases, I don't use the person's real name, just in case there are any unforeseen um, variables that would result from somebody going public with their story. They know who they are. And so I'm just going to use the names from the book. So Sean, I want to thank Sean for being so courageous and sharing his story, a story he hadn't shared with anyone outside of his mum and his aunt for many years, but was willing to share with me. And I really, really value the trust uh, of you, Sean, and of others who share their stories with me because it forces me to do more research and to think through what this information means. Troy, also, you know who you are. I'm very grateful to Troy because Troy is a real person, really is a guardian of the Navajo tradition, and probably more than anybody, let me in behind the veil to see some initiation ceremony and to see some traditional healing ceremony and to begin to understand that many of the practices of traditional shamanic healers and prophetic individuals are very tied in with modalities of contact. So, healing, guidance, contact, interdimensional contact, extraterrestrial contact, contact beyond time with people in your family line. These themes are absolutely interwoven in traditional understandings of the world and the cosmos. And as soon as you sit at the feet of ancestral narratives for information about paleo contact, you're going to have to hear about these other aspects. They're absolutely interwoven. And Troy showed me that, showed me how it works, why it's done this way, how long it's been done this way. And the information that Troy gave me is absolutely profound and really helped to shape Echoes of Eden as a whole. Jay is a great friend of mine, an Australian friend, and somebody who I really admire for the amazing journey he's made. And he shares a story which I hope will invite readers who've had experiences they can't explain to remember the experiences and talk about them and share them. Jay had an experience that at the time he did not understand. He couldn't get his head around it. And it was only decades later that he realized it was possibly a close encounter with an ET entity that simply looked entirely human and absolutely beautiful and wonderfully attractive. And it was only when he read The Scars of Eden that he realized his experience in Australia 30 years ago absolutely fits a pattern that is global and generations old. And so I tell his story. I love being able to tell individual stories of people I know because it provides a really easy way into some really profound subject material. And it's part of what gives Echoes of Eden the energy. It's part of what means you can give Echoes of Eden to any reader, someone who gives paleo contact zero credibility, uh, has zero interest in it. But the personal angles of my story and individual stories in it really helps the reader from chapter to chapter to get into these topics and begin joining the dots for themselves. I couldn't write it that way without your collaboration and without you guys sharing with me your stories. And thank you again if you've done that. And if you found your way into Echoes, you'll know who you are. Same with Heather, who shares a story similar to Jay's, but at an even more personal level. Thank you so much for that. It is, as I say, a lifetime of travel that has been condensed into Echoes of Eden as I begin to see the connections between my own intersection with folklore, indigenous narrative, traditions of healing, and I begin to realize that what our indigenous elders say is correct. These are all interwoven with our understanding of our place in the cosmos and how we can relate to the ocean of company in which we live our lives, whether we know it or not. Let me have a look here. Who else do I want to say thank you to? Jason. I'm going to mention Jason. You will enjoy the section in Echoes of Eden when you get to Jason, because Jason is a colleague of mine from the world of Christian ministry. And what happens to him and what he shares is not what you would expect to hear from a worship pastor in a Christian church. And I've included his story because it's an amazing story, because in an incredible way it opens up the story of Plato and his incredible contribution to all these topics. But sharing his story is also a reminder that people can come to the territory that I explore in the Eden series and on the Fifth Kind TV and on the Paul Wallace channel from all different kinds of start points. They may come to it from their studying of politics on planet Earth and recognizing patterns that take us beyond the human analysis. They may come to it from their studies in DNA research and realize the timeline of DNA takes us well and truly off the planet and outside of our solar system. They may come to it from studying neuroscience. And the moment they start studying acquired savant syndrome, they need to reach for and find ancestral narratives to explain the whys and wherefores of what they're seeing, again, in real time, in the real world. They may come to it by reading ancient texts, such as I have. They may come to it through paranormal experiences. And if you're in ministry long enough, you'll have plenty of those. And Jason, I could say, perhaps fits into that category. Jason reminds us that whatever a person's area of expertise or area of curiosity, there will be anomalies they are coming across that point to the universe having a different nature to what they thought. And Echoes of Eden will latch on to whatever it is that's caught their attention and take them on a journey. Where am I going after Echoes of Eden? Well, Echoes of Eden has been a huge enterprise for it to find its focus, for it to get written, for me to get the words right. And we've self-published this one with the amazing help of my amazing wife, Ruth. We have actually published it ourselves through Amazon KDP. And I know some people don't like Amazon, but it's actually very empowering to authors to be able to do that. And every so often you do need to put out a book that is self-published to make it economically useful at all. And so we've done that this time around, and it's been a huge effort. And I'm really excited to see how that works. It'll be the first book I've published in this series without a professional designated publicist. And the reason I have the confidence to do that is because the incredible support of people like you who share my posts, who share my videos, who actually buy my books and talk about them. And there's such a wave of momentum that's built through Escaping from Eden and the Scars of Eden because of what you've done, that the footing is there to self-publish and know that there will be conversation around it to carry it forward. And we're already seeing, just in the period where people have only been able to pre-order the Kindle, it's been charting alongside and ahead of Escaping from Eden and the Scars of Eden. So this is exciting. So it looks like it's positioned to absolutely follow in the footsteps of those first two in the series. Later today, it will be released. The Kindle copies will be downloaded. Paperback is available. People can get that. As soon as you get your copy, please can I ask you the favor, once you've got into it, and especially once you've finished it, please post a review on the platform where you buy the book, because more than anything a publicist could do, it is the reviews that people post on places like Amazon that help the book to chart, that get others to spot the book. Amazon will show people the book if it's had lots of reviews. So please, if you can, when you've got the book, when you've read the book, post your review of Echoes of Eden, and it just helps get the attention of other readers who might come in on a recommendation and try it on a whim. And that's what takes the book to the next level. So all this is happening with Echoes of Eden, which is tremendously exciting. In the next in the series, I'm going back to the question of what was the Bible before it became a book about God? Anyone who's read Escaping from Eden knows there are other stories in there and often come away with the question how much of this is about God and how much is about paleo contact? And was it the writer's intention to write books about paleo contact? Or was the book about something else? And paleo contact is just a part of the story. And so I asked that question, what was the Bible before it became a book about God? And I go to the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament and look at how we understand what's happening in the New Testament. Once you're able to peel back layers of erroneous translation or the cultural accretions of 2,000 years of institutional Christianity, when you go to the root meanings, which is my big thing, the root meanings of the words, what is the story that emerges? And you might say, well, why do you want to go there? The reason is because I think the real agenda of the ancient writers is empowering. And I think it's empowering to set people free from all the distortions, from all the false agendas, from all the fear mongering, from all the manipulation, from all the instruments of control and thought control that have distorted the old stories and spoiled our experience in the present. And I know that these distortions that have come, often through institutional religion, spoil people's lives. They put people in a state of anxiety and confusion, tiptoeing around, desperate not to offend an almighty God that they think is mercurial and unpredictable and punitive in the way that the translation suggests when they go to, for instance, the Old Testament. This is why Bible translation, I mean, it sounds such a rarefied topic, but why it's so important, because if you get it wrong, you put people under this horrible weight that spoils people's quality of life. And I know that for myself, but I know it because of hundreds of people who have contacted me through having read Escaping from Eden, The Scars of Eden, Echoes of Eden, or who have watched my material on the Fifth Kind TV or the Paul Wallace channel. People in every generation saying, thank you, because a huge weight has lifted from my shoulders. I was taught this in Sunday school. My parents taught this. And I always knew it was wrong. When I asked questions, I was beaten. When I asked too many questions in my church, I was excommunicated. When I reject a pat explanation that is clearly rubbish, I've become the black sheep in my own family, and it's been isolating, it's been painful, it's been confusing. I've had these anomalous experiences or these close encounters. I can't talk about them. I can't square them with my faith. I'm not allowed to mention them to my pastor. I'm pastoring people who've had close encounters. I'm trying to help them, but my bishop says I have to do it without ever talking to my clergy colleagues that that's what I'm doing. People like that come to me. Sometimes they're in training for ministry. Sometimes they've been in ministry for decades. People of every age, people from their 20s through to their 80s have said, thank you, because you have set me free. And I now have this incredible appetite to know what's really going on, to know who I really am, what I'm really capable of, and it's empowering information. And so the fourth in the series is going to go there for that reason, because knowing the real agenda and dethroning the false agendas is a huge psychological relief, and it is empowering. And again, it brings us back to the question of what kind of life can I live? Now I have more information. Now I have the information I would have been taught at initiation if the initiation culture of my heritage had been allowed to continue. So really, that's the take home of all the Eden books, and it certainly is of Echoes of Eden. I hope that you'll come away from Echoes of Eden inspired about the resilience of ancient information and wisdom tradition, inspired by the incredible staying power of the world's indigenous peoples, and inspired by the possibilities that are now open to you because of the knowledge they've curated. So that's where we get to by the end of Echoes, realizing that there is a far bigger world to explore. And I'll just finish off before I appear at the comments again with, it's become my favorite Jesus quote, and it's a Root Meanings quote. And it's a summary of the message that Jesus toured with at the beginning of his ministry. Now, if you're not sure if Jesus was a real historic figure or not, or if you have different beliefs to me on that, that's absolutely fine. But I find this saying empowering. Go to the Root Meanings, and he is saying, go beyond the mind. Go beyond the mind. Think with more than this. Because the amazing powers and principles and people of the cosmos are available to you, waiting to be embraced. The Gospel of Thomas begins with the saying, this is one of the Gnostic Gospels, the kingdom of heaven is within you. And the root meaning of that is the power and principles of the cosmos operate within you, and you can operate them. So these sayings are the profoundest invitation to explore what's possible and to explore where you are and who you are and what you're capable of. It is the invitation of all our traditional wisdom and initiation cultures. And that's what I unpack in Echoes of Eden. So I'm going to have a peer at comments and questions while we're together, because it's such a treat to be with you. And I don't know if you can imagine this, but it really does encourage me and give me energy to be in your company when we do the live streams. And I will make every effort to do them on a far more regular basis for that reason. Yonder is Gone says, I've been a member of the Fifth Kind TV for many years. Good on you. Thank you. If you haven't yet, you need to see all Paul's work he's published on there. I highly recommend. There are many people who watch the Fifth Kind TV for years and they don't realize there's a Paul Wallace channel as well. So please gossip that information so that people will know. The channel's building, but I'd love to see more watching both channels because it's a slightly different emphasis from one channel to the next. Joe Hodgson says, I run a podcast called the Up the Vibe and would love to have you on as a guest sometime if you'd be willing. I loved your chat with the great Matt LaCroix. Shelley Pierce says, that was an excellent video. Yes, I love Matt LaCroix. I love his integrity as a researcher. And Joe, absolutely. Yes, of course. I will come on your show and we'll have a conversation. And if any of you guys have favorite podcasts or shows you think I should be on, or that you'd like to see discussing the themes of Echoes of Eden, then they usually have a contact page or an email address in the About section on their YouTube channel. Let them know that you'd like to see me on. Let me know, and I can follow that up as well, because the more the merrier. It's a treat and a privilege for me to appear on other people's podcasts and other people's shows where they're curating the content really carefully, as we have to these days for all the algorithmic reasons. And it's a treat for me to meet with new people and take the conversation to new demographics. So I love appearing on shows I've never appeared on before. So Joe, absolutely, yes, I will. Let's see now. Yes, yeah, Yonder is gone. I absolutely understand. A lot of people who do a lot of driving are asking me for audibles, and yes, I really want to do that. I enjoy reading, and it's lovely being read too, isn't it? I like that as well. Do I know anything about the Serpo planet in Zeta Reticuli? No, I don't, but you've given me the prompt to go and look that up. Another reason I love these conversations, because you give me more white rabbits to pursue. Do you think we will ever know the complete truth? Asks April Ray. I fantasize that the Black Knight satellite, I think it's called, is really a recording device, and one day we can access it. Yes, accessing recorded information. I've got a couple of videos about that. Some people use the language of the Akashic record for that. And yes, monitoring device. There are quite a few ancestral stories that talk about the observers and the watchers, and they have questions just like that about the Black Knight satellite. Will we know everything? Well, that's a great question to live with, isn't it? Because I think I anticipate my life being a perpetual journey of learning. I think I will be learning after this material life is concluded. Will we know everything? I think you can get quite a rounded picture through the wisdom traditions, through the information that survives through the ages, despite efforts by every empire to extinguish it. I think you can get quite a full picture. I think if you're open to the idea of contact and that we're actually being provided by interdimensionally with information, then that opens up a world of possibilities for higher information. If you go to Plato, for instance, he's open that some of his information came from interdimensional contact, and that is why his writings had this incredible scope and perspicuity, where you could go to Plato and say he really did write about everything. He achieved that through contact. And I believe similar. People have long talked about muses. And I think I speak to many people who are beginning to believe every one of us has an invisible team, just as our shamanic teachers would teach us. And our invisible team is there to support our progress through life and to provide us with information as we go through life. I talk about the Cathars in Echoes of Eden, who made that central to their daily lifestyle, that they would be in contact with their higher selves, with cosmic information and able to download it. And they believed, absolutely, yes, the potential is there to know everything, because before we incarnated as human beings, we were part of the cosmic whole. That was how they viewed it. Our consciousness is a participation in source consciousness, and source consciousness knows everything. So if we can develop our connection with our higher selves, with our guides, with our invisible team, something that the New Testament talks about, then there's no limits to what information can flow our way. But I suspect, as I say, you and I will be on a lifelong learning journey. And I think that's an exciting way to do it. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Yonder is gone. I really hope you enjoy Echoes of Eden. Let me know how you go. You know that I'm in the Paul Wallace channel every day in conversation with people, and I love comparing notes in that place. You can message me through the Paul Wallace website, which is paulanthonywallace.com. If you go there, you will find the form where you can send me a much longer message than is convenient through comments on YouTube, and you might have things you don't want to put out for everybody to read on a YouTube channel. I get all those messages that come through my website, they come into my email, and then we can have an email conversation. And from time to time, I'm able to do face to face conversations as well. I have to ration those a bit just for being economical with my time, but you can reach me in that way through the website if you'd like a longer conversation. Emerald Tablets of Thoth teach us how to call upon the powers of the universe. Yes, indeed. And the Hermetic tradition as well, which is something I touch on in Echoes of Eden. It's just incredible the overlap of information across traditions and the durability of particular sources, like the Hermetic sources. Again, they're suppressed, they're put on the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the books Roman Catholics are not allowed to read, and there's censorship in every culture, and yet the information survives. So, yes, I do go there in Echoes. All right. I think I think that's all the points that are up there so far. I'm glad I'm glad you can't wait for this book. Yes, I remember being in elementary school, says yonder is gone, and my history teacher saying we are a species with amnesia. Yes, indeed, that's a phrase that Graham Hancock has championed. Plato said it 2,500 years before. I think it's right. There is so much to remember. That's why I talk about memory in the taglines of my books. Scars of Eden asks, has humanity confused the idea of God with memories of ET contact? Echoes of Eden asks, what secrets of human potential were buried along with our ancestors' memories of ET contact? We are a species with amnesia, not because there's something wrong with us, but because we are manipulated into forgetting. We are forced into forgetting. Whole cultures have had their written heritage incinerated by colonial forces to ensure that we forget. And I hope that the Eden series can play its little part in the massive act of remembering that is going on right now as we remember who we are, what we're capable of, what kind of human experience we can have on planet Earth. So I'm going to conclude here. Thank you so much for being with me for the live stream. And if you're watching the replay, g'day. I'm sorry you weren't with us live. I'll make sure I give you lots of notice with the notification next time. Thank you for being my readers. Thank you for reading and engaging with me. It gives me energy for the journey. It spurs me on to do more research and to share more as I go. Again, hoping it brings more and more people into the conversation. And a special thank you to you today for being here to encourage me on book launch day. And it will be 6 a.m. Eastern time that we're going to hit the button and Echoes of Eden is going to go live, and you can download your Kindle, order your paperback, and then shortly after that, the book launch video will go up on the Paul Wallace channel. A little later in the day, the book launch video on the Fifth Kind TV will go up. So I'll look out for you in the comments there as well. Thanks for sharing the day with me today. It's a really special day. It's an exciting day. It's my birthday week. I'm really happy you could be part of it. Thank you for being here right now. And I will see you next time around. Have a wonderful day. All the best.